Good morning. I'm checking if I'm audible.
Good morning.
Morning. Am I audible?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Recording in progress.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, Chair.
Morning, Chairperson.
Good morning, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Our meeting today is virtual as per the permission granted by the Chair of Chair. After we made aware that the National Treasury will not be available, and we thought that rather than drawing members away from the constituencies, we would not have a virtual meeting. Today we'll only have a briefing from the Department of Defense on the Project Thusano and the migration of Project Thusano from Thusano to Han. But the meeting will be agendas to say all of you members are welcome. Senior management team from the Department of Defense, generals, you're welcome. Support staff from executive offices, you're welcome. Including support staff from our office. You're all more than welcome. We'll then move to our second item on apologies. But before I move to apologies, can we adopt the agenda?
Chair, I move that we adopt the agenda.
On the house's move, can I get a support?
Chair, I'll second that.
Thank you very much. We can then move to our second item on apologies. The secretary told you in the part of the surveillance.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning to the Deputy Minister and members in the platform. There's only two apologies, one from the Minister, she's attending a cabinet meeting, and one from Ms. Nontenja. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The apologies are noted. We'll then move to our third agenda item. Background briefing by the on Project Thusano in terms of all the irregular expenditures. Over to the department.
Sorry, Chair. Chair, I think you are not 100% audible. Your sound is not very clear, Chair. So maybe other people can't hear you clearly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. You're breaking up quite a lot. So I don't know if it can be assisted, perhaps to get a better reception, but it is difficult to hear.
Okay, but now can you hear me?
Sounds a bit better, Chair. Let's try. It sounds a bit better. Thank you.
Okay. Can we move to the third item? I'll hand over to the department. Here, you can introduce your delegation, and we are handing over to you.
Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, officials from AGSA, Defense Force officials, just to confirm that we're here to represent the department and also represent our minister who's right now in the cabinet dealing with the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Dear. We'll now hand over. Oh, I did not welcome the officials of the Auditor General of South Africa. My apologies. You are more than welcome to our meeting. I'll now hand over to the department. Over to you.
Just ask, is the AG present office or representative? No. He says he's handing over to the department.
Sorry, Chair. It should be Auditor General South Africa first, Chair. They are number 3 on the item, and then the department comes number 4 after the Auditor General.
Oh, okay. No problem. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. No problem. Before the department, we'll now hand over to the Auditor General of South Africa. Representatives to present what are irregular and fundless expenditure for Project Thusano. I'll now hand over to you, Office of the Auditor General.
Thank you so much, Chair. And good morning to honorable members. I hope I am audible. I have with me my team. I have Mbali Dotsetsi, my Deputy Business Unit Leader within the Office of the Auditor General. I also have Edward Kutsia, the Senior Manager responsible for the Defense Audit Portfolio, as well as Krishna Janse van Rensburg, also Senior Manager within the Office of the Auditor General. Honorable members, we have shared a presentation with you, and we are bringing with you today an overview of the findings that we identified, as well as insights we identified on the Project Thusano. From my side, I will hand over to Edward to take you through the presentation. Thereafter, we will be able to engage with you on any clarity or any questions that you have with the findings and the insights that we've been providing the department over the years from 2021 up until 2023. Edward, you can go ahead and do the presentation.
Thank you, Michelle, and good morning, Honourable Chair, Honourable Members. As Michelle indicated, we have shared a presentation, and I'll quickly project for us, and then I'll just confirm if it is visible on the side of the members. Okay, it's projected, and I trust it is visible.
Yeah, it's visible now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that confirmation. I will also just maybe see if I can enlarge. There we go. Honourable members, yes, we've been asked to do a briefing, and it would be fitting for us to start off with some background to the project. Firstly, our mission statement, we have gone through it in a BRRR, but I think quite important here is that we want to partner with this committee, with the department, in order to move the department in terms of the continuum and to ultimately build public confidence. Looking at our overall space in terms of our accountability ecosystem, I think it's very important to take note that all role players is required to support this process, to work together, to ultimately move towards a system that's fully accountable and to enhance, obviously, citizenship and the ultimate impact on the citizen. I'm going to go straight into the background of the irregular expenditure for Thusano, and it's important to maybe just give a bit of background when it comes to the agreement. So initially, there was a bilateral agreement with government that was signed with Cuba in 2012, so that is the overarching agreement. And in terms of this agreement, each of the countries needs to confirm that they actually account for the transactions and subsequent commitments and also agreements in terms of the applicable laws and regulations in that specific country. So in the sense of South Africa, that would be the PFMA, treasury regulations, and so forth. And then the agreement then gave rise basically to Project Thusano in the Department of Defence. So since 2014, the department entered into two specific contracts with the various supplementary agreements with contractors in the Cuban government. Then moving in terms of a bit of detail on the two contracts. The first contract is specifically set in terms of providing professional services, more specifically the services in terms of repairs and maintenance for transport technology, aviation equipment, and medical equipment. And the second contract then relates to professional training that is then provided in that environment. Maybe then going to the definition of irregular expenditure, because it's important to just get a background as to the laws and regulations we would have used during our audit process to evaluate these contracts again. So firstly, irregular expenditure, as members would know, is expenditure other than unauthorized expenditure incurred in contravention with specific applicable legislation. So there's three areas of legislation that we specifically considered. The first one is the Constitution of South Africa. And in terms of the Constitution, it's important that information or basically goods is acquired in a way that's fair, equitable, and transparent and cost-effective. Then if we look at Treasury Regulation 16A 6.4, it does give an opportunity to deviate and procure through other means. However, such deviations needs to be approved by a specific accounting officer or accounting authority. If we then look at the National Treasury SCM instruction number 3 of 2016, it does then indicate such deviations should take place in very specific circumstances in the case of emergency or sole supplier. So there's nobody else in the market that can provide that services. But in such a case where there's a deviation, prior written approval is required. If there's under exceptional cases that deviation is required, and that should then be obtained from Treasury. So our finding during the audit process then related to the procurement processes that didn't take place prior to entering into the various supplementary agreements with the Cuban entity. And that process is then not aligned in terms of the legislation that I did go through just now. So our conclusion is that based on the review, the supplementary agreements have been considered and needs to comply with our domestic laws. And we came into the conclusion that this was not adhered to because the procurement of the goods and services through the bilateral agreement was not done in such a manner that it confirmed that it corresponded with the legislation that's set out above. And then impacts on the contract as a whole being considered as irregular expenditure. If we then look at the irregular expenditure, we've just did a graph there for the last 5 years. It dates back to a period earlier than that, but there is a depiction just of the last 5 years of the actual irregular expenditure then incurred on this contract. I must just point out on the 24-25 year, that's still shut the country's audit. So in that regard, we will only conclude on it when we issue our audit report towards the latter part of this year. We've also broken down the nature of the irregular expenditure. From that, it's quite clear that the majority relates to the professional and technical services, according to the first contract, and there's also a considerable amount relating to the vocational training and services in terms of the second part of the contract, and then a portion in terms of the medicine, which I'll also break down a bit later on in the presentation. So in total, the department incurred the irregular expenditure as disclosed in the financials up to date of 1.699 billion, about 1.7 billion. And this amount excludes other supplementary costs like, for instance, catering of aircrafts and the likes of additional items that was supplementary to the contract. Maybe also for the benefit of the committee, I'll run through some of the insights on Project Thusano that we've identified and also discussed and brief committees in the past on, dating back to the period of 2021-2022, just for the benefit of members to also be afraid with the items we did pick up out of a value for money perspective on our audit. So looking back at the 2021-22 year as well into the 22-23 year, we basically unpacked the supplementary agreements, and we noted that in certain cases they're open-ended contracts. There's two main contracts that was entered into. The first one is the technical repair and maintenance services. That's on your left-hand side on the screen. So in terms of that contract, about 10,797 military vehicles were repaired and maintained through Project Thusano. And that spanned over the period from February 2015 till February 2022. So in terms of the findings that we picked up during the audit, we gained some insights. And in terms of economy, we've noted that it costed roughly 2.8 times more per hour using this contract compared to the South African industry labor costs. So that's in terms of economy, efficiency. The hours spent by the Cuban officials were not specifically recorded in job cards, so it wasn't possible to establish the efficiency in that regard. And in effectiveness, we couldn't determine in terms of the storing of the samples whether they stored in an appropriate state, as the requirements in that regard wasn't provided to the audit team. So in terms of the right-hand side, we've also looked at vocational training for the engineers and technicians. So a total of 196 transport technical students were enrolled at Cuba. And we've also identified certain insights in terms of the economy. The mechanical engineers was also deemed to cost more in terms of the equivalent tertiary training in South Africa. Then in terms of efficiency, about 52% in terms of transport technique students compared to the training that could have been obtained in South Africa, wasn't at that time accredited to the SACWA requirements. And in effectiveness, the DoD did not realize return on investment based on our projections, and there's also a cost calculation that it costs additional in that regard. So the root causes that we've identified in that regard, as depicted in the middle of the screen, is that cost-benefit analysis was not necessarily performed at the beginning of the contract, and then inadequate record keeping to support the financial performance reporting and decision-making was also identified during the project that we've audited. That is the 2021 till 2022-23 year that we've evaluated. Then when we look at the 2022-23 and the 23-24 year, some of this is similar to what we've reported in our BRRR presentation toward the end of last year. But on your left-hand side, members, you would see a comparative study that we've done compared between the timelines between a medical student, a psychological student, and a biomedical engineer, the time it would take for them to study in South Africa compared to Cuba. And then you'll see in the red there, there's considerable additional time that's required if they study through Cuba. So we've depicted that. And towards the middle part of the screen as well, we've identified that the department paid about 136% more for medical students studying in Cuba compared to the South African tertiary institution. We've also then indicated our findings in terms of impact, root cause, recommendations, and insight. I'll briefly just touch on that. In terms of the insights, about 6 medical students, only 28%, was successful in the initial 18-month integration course at UP. The successful B psychological students did not enroll for further studies to qualify as professional critical psychologists. And then the biomedical engineer students would not be able to register with the ECSA, that's the body to be registered and to be able to practice. In terms of the impact thereof, the additional spending of the SS tertiary institutions then had additional salary costs, and then existing medical costs could not be filled. And the students was not able to practice ultimately as in their professional careers when they returned. Root causes to that is the lack of research and additional or initial assessment of the content in terms of the SACWA accreditation, and then no plan for further career development. And then in terms of recommendations, I think it's very important to take note of the fact that the courses should be evaluated for their appropriateness beforehand, and then also to collaborate with Department of Health in that regard, and to maybe review the full bilateral agreement in terms of the benefits for the DoD and the country as a whole. Also to acknowledge that there has been subsequent progress and processes which was implemented by specifically South African Medical Health Services during the 24-25 year audit. We'll also touch on it a bit later on. In terms of the material irregularity, we thought it good for the committee also just to highlight the material irregularity that we identified during previous periods. So we did identify a material irregularity where vials of Eberron drugs was imported into the country without following the necessary protocols and processes to get them registered with SACWA as required for such drugs. The department basically paid a total of 33.5 million to the supplier for the Eberron drugs, and that then resulted in a material irregularity. The non-compliance would have resulted in a likely material financial loss of about 260 million, but that was then prevented as the drugs was repatriated through the process back to Cuba. In terms of the further actions that is still continuing until today, as indicated, a process was started and it was completed in terms of the repatriation of the drugs. That was concluded between the period of January 22 till February 22, and thereby the department prevented the 226.8 million loss. And then on 30th of September 2022, the acting public prosecutor issued a report and made remedial actions available, and then the accounting officer referred certain remedial actions from the acting public prosecutor to the SIU on 30th October 2022. So the SIU advised the AGSA that the investigation into the matter would identify any losses incurred and that these would then be recovered. And the AGSA is acknowledging the role that the SIU is playing in this matter and also welcomes the recent progress report that was provided by the SIU into this item. Then in terms of our call to action, we've made certain recommendations. In terms of the recommendations, it's important for the department to review the bilateral agreement in terms of also the supplementary agreements to ensure that it benefits the DoD, and to also evaluate the cost and duration of the professional services against those provided in South Africa to ensure that the objectives of the bilateral agreement are achieved in a manner that's economic and efficient. Then also to ensure that where there is a need to deviate from the normal procurement processes, that is justified and approved, as there is new contracts now entered into. And then also the quantity of the payments in terms of Project Thusano should be disclosed as irregular expenditure, and that effective subsequent steps should be taken against officials who permitted the irregular expenditure. If we then look at the progress since the AGSA recommendations, the former minister did commit to review the project, and based on the recent feedback, there has been new contracts entered into, which I believe the department will elaborate more on in the next agenda point. And then the Auditor General has been provided with some of these new contracts, and we are then currently considering these during our current audit process that's running from now till the end of July. And the irregular expenditure has been disclosed in the financial statements, and that has been done since 2022 financial year. Maybe in terms of the way forward, we've got Project Thusano. In terms of that, the AG will do follow-up audit work in terms of the finding in the previous year recommendations that will be then reported in our June 2025 July audit report. And in the new project, we are currently in the process of evaluating the new contract. We'll do so during our procurement audit that's scheduled for this period ending end of July, and that we can then report on in the PRRR session that's scheduled shortly thereafter. In terms of actions from the department side, it would be important to do analysis, firstly in terms of a cost-benefit analysis and the due diligence assessment of the professional services that's obtained from Cuba. And in terms of investigations into the circumstances that led to the irregular should be finalized and concluded. And then for any new contracts or expenditure in future, deviation should be adequately documented and approved by the accounting officer and National Treasury where applicable. Committee members, that is in brief background on the Thusano. I'll pause at this point and allow for questions through you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to allow members to ask questions before we move to the next presentation. I'll request that we stick to 3 minutes so that we deal with other business. Okay. I see Honorable Chris Artemis, right? Honorable Carlos. Any other hands? Okay, let's start with the 2 minutes of Honorable Carlos. I will Honorable Chris Artemis, Honorable Carlos, Honorable Shalin. Thank you. Over to you, Honorable.
Chair, so you start. I can't hear you properly. You're starting with Honorable Hutton and then coming to me. Is that the order?
That's correct.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, your sound is still very difficult to hear. So we will try our best. Thank you.
Okay. No, I mean the office here in Ghana. I'm not sure what is the problem. Yes, we'll start with Honorable Chris Arthur, Honorable Harmios, and Honorable Shalin.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I'm more audible than you are. I really struggle to understand what you are saying. Chair, I would like to thank the Auditor General, Mr. Kutsia, for this presentation. I need some clarity obviously this has been going on for quite a while, and it appears that there is really no, well, if there is any benefit to the Department of Defense, to the SANDF, with the Cuban maintenance teams that come here, I fail to see that, apart from skills transfer. I would like to have the Auditor General's opinion on this aspect. Where is the benefit? And secondly, if I don't know whether the Auditor General perhaps audited that, but if we look at this has been going on for more than a decade, and I think more than 3 billion has been expended on this. Our vehicles are in a shocking state. They have not been preserved. And I really don't see the benefit if we just look at the SAML fleet, all the different types of that. I don't see the benefit, and if there was a benefit, then surely it should have been in the skills transfer, so that units can be able to maintain their own vehicles. But that doesn't seem to be happening. And also then, in the same vein, if we have expended more than 3 billion over the more than a decade on this, why do we still then need, if there was skills transfer, why do we still need the Cubans to come into South Africa and to do the maintenance if there was sufficient skills transfer happening? Another aspect that I don't know whether the AG has got an answer on this, but the Denel and Arms Corps that were doing this type of work obviously had to lay off people when they didn't do the work anymore because of the Cubans coming into the country and doing the work. Now, obviously, when a company is doing the work, they pay taxes, and then also the people working for that company in South Africa pay taxes. So there's an additional benefit to the fiscus. Instead of having money flowing out of the country to invest it in the country, which is exactly one of the themes of the government of national unity, to grow the economy and to create jobs. I see this as exactly the opposite. I don't know whether the AG has got an opinion on that. And if the effect of this, outsourcing it to a foreign company, foreign organization, institution, versus and paying much more, I think it's, as far as the maintenance is concerned, it's 3.8 times more expensive to use the Cuban mechanics than to use South African mechanics, if we look at the figures that the Auditor General has provided. So as far as the engineering side, I don't benefit. In fact, I see this as a massive loss for South Africa, where we are sacrificing jobs on the South African side and create jobs on the Cuban side. That is perhaps more explanation on slides 9 and then the benefits for South Africa. Then on slide 10, medical training. Well, I also failed to see any benefit for South Africa or the SANDF in this. If we look at the table, medicine students, and only a fraction of them actually gets employed by the DOD, taking 8.5 years to do a qualification that would have taken 6 years in South Africa, 5.75 years for psychology students versus 4 years in South Africa, and then a massive 8 years in Cuba versus 3 years in South Africa for the non-medical engineers. I don't see the benefit. And then I would just like to ask a question to the AG. Were all the costs that has been incurred to have our students studying in Cuba in the different aspects actually been calculated into the equation? For instance, there are foreign allowances, there are travel back for holidays, and those things. I would like to know whether what we are seeing here, is that the full picture? That's where I will conclude at this stage. No, just one other thing. Is the AG aware, as far as the Hebron incident is concerned, whether there were any internal disciplinary action instituted by the SANDF? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Martin. Honorable Leons.
Thank you so much, Chair. And let me first of all thank the AG for this detailed report that we have received about Project Thusano. I would like us to treat this particular input from the AG on the level of it being a technical assessment by the Auditor General on the basis of balanced understanding of a project that had been agreed to between the South African National Defence Force and the government of Cuba, thus the South African government and the government of Cuba. So I would like us to deal with this whole project on that level and treat it in the understanding that this project served over a period of time to attend to some serious problems that the South African National Defence Force had been faced with, especially with regards to some of the older equipment that it has and experience, which I understand existed within Cuba and still continue to exist in Cuba, to deal with older vehicles and older mission critical equipment. So in addition to the concerns that the AG expressed with regards to material irregularities, and I note them, and I think it is important that with regards to the South African side, the SANDF must take responsibility for those material irregularities. And also it has to take responsibility for the status and the condition in which the various vehicles are. This is obviously something which is in the hands of the SANDF. But at the same time, I would like to hear if the AG had made an assessment when it calculated the issues around cost and all of that, about the unique experience that Cuba had built up over a period of time, also because of sanctions and because of the various vagaries of the international diplomatic world that forced it to be able to deal with equipment in a way that very few others may have. I also want to know if the AG, in the process of this assessment, had taken into consideration the issue of reliability of an agreement. I understand that there are now assessments being made about comparatively what Denel and some companies in South Africa could offer compared to what was offered through this agreement by Cuba. But I also want to understand if the AG had taken into consideration the problem that the SANDF had been faced with over a considerable period of time by Denel and by local South African manufacturers and maintenance companies that proved to be very unreliable. And whether there is a particular price or a particular value that the AG would place to the issue of reliability and the issue of unique experience. In this context, I think it is then important to ask the AG to give us a total overview on how the irregular expenditure balances against some of these concerns that I've raised. In the overall political context, one has to think about projects like this in the understanding that internationally there are big vagaries and irregular and unreliable situations that one may be faced with. A most recent example is the problem that we are faced with now with the United States of America and the position that the President of the United States of America had taken to South Africa, and that obviously in that international political context, this agreement also has to be assessed. I want to conclude, Chair, that while on the one hand, the technical issues of AG that has assessed a particular agreement and identified irregularities, material irregularities, has to be taken very seriously. And I want to hear from the AG what follow-up it is doing with regards to the failure of those in the Department of Defense and Military Veterans in the SANDF to have executed their duties properly. But I also want to understand if the AG had taken this eagle's view with regards to the international context within which this contract has been concluded, and if it is able to give us an evaluation in terms of the value of the contract in that context. And then lastly, Chair, I understand that we now have Project Kalo. Project Kalo will be presented to us by the SANDF, and one hopes that Project Kalo had taken on board some of the concerns that have been raised, the red flags that have been raised by the AG in terms of material irregularities and so on from the side of the current and concluding Project Thusano. Obviously, the AG is not able yet to evaluate the implementation of Project Kalo, but I'm sure it has been in interaction with the SANDF in order to ensure that Project Kalo will be complying in terms of the issues that it raised with those matters that have been raised, and that the same irregularities will not be repeated with regards to Project Kalo. So I want to hear to what extent the AG is able to comment on that, and obviously we will raise the same with the SANDF once they present to us Project Kalo. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, well, I think today we are dealing, with a very, very, important issue in the presence of the AG, that is Project Thusano. Now, I think the report is clear that Project Thusano has contributed a lot to have, our fiscals, reduced, and what is happening now, if you look at the comparison, as it's clear that if it's 3 times what they are charging us, so now we need now to be clear, maybe the AG, if can advise us, is this advisable to continue with this bilateral agreement with Cuba? Is South Africa benefiting anything? I will refer, the AG to their report where, under technical repair, where, they say, according to the department, it's about 10,779 military vehicles that were repaired and maintained through the Project Thusano between 2015 and 2022. Now, my question, is there a substantial proof that 10,779 vehicles were repaired and maintained and are still in use? And what's happening with those vehicles? That's a concern, because if we look at that, one will say the Cuban government or Cuban, labor being, given to South Africa has, saved this country when it comes to the 10,779 military vehicles. I just want to know if the AG has satisfied, itself that this job was done satisfactory, and if it was done, how long were those vehicles, used or were usable? And then, the AG, speaking of, say, is recommending that a deviation be allowed pending the approval by the accounting officer or the national treasurer. Now, I'm just asking now, according to their knowledge, the accounting officer was not aware of this deviation. If he was not aware of this deviation, who was responsible for that deviation? Has the accounting officer taken any disciplinary measures to ensure that that deviation does not, take place again? But the recommendation is either the accounting officer or the national treasurer. But the question is, who was responsible for deviation if it was not the accounting officer? Also, I think, the AG has touched, the issue of the heparin drug that, was on news many times. If it's possible, I didn't get the AG, say like how many of these heparin drugs were delivered to South Africa. And then at the same time, if say 33 million rand was paid, I want to know why, because the department, there was a recommendation that those heparin drugs were supposed to be returned to Cuba because they brought into the country without the approval of SAPRA. I just want to know the status more. What's happening? What was the total, if they do have the number? And then how much was returned back to Cuba? Or what happened with the stock, because the stock was never used? And now, considering, that looking, if we agree, with the AG, I still maintain the question. Looking to our country right now, we are struggling, as we know that, the government needs more money even to approve the budget. How can we continue spending so much to Cuba, knowing that locally we can do the work better? I know that it may be difficult for the AG to report, but is it advisable to continue with this under these circumstances we are facing in the country? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Plugis.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think it would have been better that we discuss this AG report and next briefing all together. But in anyway, I note the AG's report on Thusano. But I think, Chair, the input without the irregular expenditures, we find it beneficiary for this kind of bilaterals between Cuba and ourselves to happen. And the only thing that we're having is some issues that must be dealt with. And I think the AG is very clear on the issue of value for money, that we must get a real value for the money that we put in. But I would have noted this report, Chair, and maybe we get to the next presentation, and maybe we try to link the two together, because right there we will begin to find out what is the linkage between what the AG find now and what does the Department of Defense think they are going to put in place for measures of trying to curb what the AGF pick up. If they don't, we then have another issue to discuss. But that was my issue, Chair. I think Comrade Carl or my colleague Carl have covered me very well on what I wanted to engage on.
Thank you very much, Honorable Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. I will have aligned myself with what Honorable Windy has said. But also then to say then I'll reserve my question to ask the DG, the AG once department is presented, because this is interlinked. I'm raising it because yes, the project has already come to an end and it has been reviewed as the AG has reported. Then there's a new one that I presume replaced the one that you are dealing with. So I should think if we have allowed the department to also present, because it will be also in response to the issues as raised by the AG, then we could be able to fully interact with the presentation. Having said that, I'll reserve my right to comment now. I'll do it later once the department is presented. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, honorable members. I would also would like to have my bite on the points raised by the AG. I just want to deal with one or two things. My first point would be the relationship of the audit executive from the AGSA and the Department of Defense. I'm raising this point based on the point that according to the recommendation number 1 says the department must review the bilateral agreement. Whether was that done on the AG, so that we know where we stand with this particular matter. The second point is related to the audit services raised, which brings us to about 1.69 billion loss according to this program. Whether all those audit queries as raised by the AG, did the department take any initiative to reply to those audit queries or findings which the Auditor General raised to the department, so that we get it from the point. The reason why I asked about also the relationship of the audit executive, if you look at the root cause, amongst it is the issue of the cost benefit analysis. So obviously, it means the department on any move which they have to do, they will have to consult with the audit executive. Find out this will bring a query or finding or delivering possibilities. That relationship between the department and the office of the AG, how is it? Because most of the findings here, I can see, they will even migrate to the new program. If there is no bond or that personal relationship between the department and the office of the organization. That's the point that I thought we must raise. I don't mind going to combining the two presentations, but I wanted us to deal with Thusano, clear Thusano, then move to Kalo and use the experience of Thusano to correct. That's why I've separated the two items. But members are welcome to continue raising their points in the next presentation. Thank you very much. I can hand over our audit or our AG's office.
Thank you so much, Chair, and honorable members. I will start and then I'll hand over to Mbali to take some of the questions, as well as Krishna. And then Edward will then take some of them if some of them are not answered, and then we will then see if there aren't any that are answered. From the start, when we look at the agreement with the bilateral agreement, it was clear in the agreement that the agreement was subjected to each of the domestic laws and international obligations by both countries. Therefore, we read this to say that whatever South Africa then does, it should, in terms of this bilateral agreement, it should comply with the laws of the country. So there was no indication that the PFMA would not be applicable, so therefore it is applicable. However, the irregular expenditure then arises then when the department then enters into contractual arrangements with suppliers. And there, the Constitution of South Africa, as well as the PFMA, will say that it should go through a fair process. So therefore, the bilateral agreement allows for our Constitution and our legislation to be upheld. What we did not see is that when they entered into these agreements, was that taken into consideration, or if there is a deviation, if the deviation is approved by the appropriate leadership. And that's what resulted in the irregular expenditure in terms of the non-compliance with the legislation. In terms of the insights, and that's where a lot of the discussions are coming from, a lot of the insights that we did, we looked at whether there are any benefits in terms of what South Africa could give, as well as what the Cuban, the relationship that we have with Cuba, with these contractors have. And we did see that there are some leakages in terms of some of the rates that are charged, in terms of some of the costs that are incurred that you would get less in South Africa. And that is what our insights are looking at. And what we are saying is that the agreements that we enter into must not result in South Africa then getting leakages or taking into consideration costs that we would get less utilizing South African citizens to do that. And what we said to the department is to say, re-look at these agreements to make sure that we get the best value for money, so that we're not utilizing the Cubans where we could have utilized South Africans for less. And that's what our insights mainly cover. And Krishna will just take us through exactly what is it that we looked at in terms of obtaining the insights there. So in terms of the bilateral agreement, it does state that we should be following the laws of the country. It's just that how do we then structure the agreements with the suppliers to ensure that we do not have the leakages. And that is very critical for the new contract that has been entered into, and we will be assessing that, and that is part of the recommendations that we have included. I think let me pause there. I'll come back on the Hebron one once the team has covered with the Cuban, the insights, more on the insights in terms of the Cuban agreement. Bali, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Chair. So maybe moving on from what Michelle is explaining about having considered legislation, we also looked at a needs assessment. Actually, we requested a needs assessment that was done by the department, whereby they would have looked at the experience maybe of the Cuban entity, their reliability, and why they considered that it was appropriate to use them versus using the South African companies in particular to repair the vehicles. And we could not obtain this needs assessment that would have maybe clarified some of the questions that we had. Then maybe just to answer some of the specific questions that were asked. One of the questions was to say, have we calculated all the costs relating to the medical training? So as we indicated in the slide that deals with the regular expenditure, we have not considered those as part of the regular expenditure. On slide number 7, we indicated that amount of 1.699 billion excludes other supplementary costs, which will include, for instance, the traveling to and from Cuba. So those costs are excluded in this amount. Then moving on to other questions, Krishna will touch on the considerations maybe for the international agreements and also whether we considered international context when we reviewed the contracts. Then I want to move to the question that was saying whether the department has engaged us when they were moving on to the new project. I would say that there were engagements on this because we have been reporting on Project Thusano for a number of years, and we made certain recommendations, and some of these were accepted by the department. For instance, the one where we are saying that they must review and see whether there is benefit to the department in using these supplementary agreements. It was accepted by the former minister, and she made a commitment then that the review will be conducted. We have been informed by the department that such a review was conducted, and that is how they have then moved on to the new contract. We have at this point not received that particular analysis to show how this was reviewed and how it has then been responded to in terms of the new contract, but that's the work that we are still going to do now, and we'll report at the end of the reporting cycle in July. Then in terms of the vehicles that were repaired under Project Thusano, the number that we are stating there, whether they were repaired satisfactorily and whether they are still being used. Maybe Krishna can also assist us with that particular one because she was working closely with that work in terms of the reviews of the repairs. The deviation. Yes, the accounting officer should be aware that a deviation is allowed in exceptional instances, as we explained in our presentation. So we take it that the accounting officer was aware that it should be done, and we made a recommendation that such a deviation can be followed in this process if indeed the department has reasons why they would prefer to use the service provider from Cuba instead of using the South Africans. We are not aware of any steps then that has been taken so far to say who was responsible then for not exercising that particular deviation. On Hebron, maybe I can just start on some of the questions. So on Hebron Medicine, which was also bought under this contract of Project Thusano, in terms of the numbers that were delivered, they are contained in our slide that deals with the material irregularity on slide number 11. So in total, there were 970,695 vials of Hebron that were brought to the country in 2020. And the department paid only one payment, not the full payment. They paid the 3.5 million. And in 2022, all of these vials were then returned to Cuba, as SAPRA did not approve or authorize that the medicine be used in the country. So all of them had been returned, and the payment was the partial payment of 33.5 million was made at that point in time. In terms of the other questions, I will hand over to Krishna because the rest, I see that it was input and comments. Krishna, over to you.
Thank you, Mboli. Good morning, Honorable Chairperson members. Yes, I think let me quickly just clarify the first thing, and it's something that Mboli already raised. When a department start off with research before they go into a specific contract, they need to do that whole cost-benefit analysis to make sure that the department will get the benefit from it. And that will also then include all these calculations that we have done when we compared what is happening if we would have used South African resources versus the Cuban resources. So if that cost-benefit analysis is not being done before we go into a contract, it does put the department on the back foot in terms of how do I make sure that I get the best benefit from this specific contract. So in terms of what we have looked at, transport technique, was the two areas that Edward has covered, where we did have a look at the technical repair and maintenance services. We did compare it specifically to the South African side, and then from there we made the analysis to say if we would have used South African resources, it would have costed so much more when we're using the Cuban side. I think in terms of specifically the technical repair and maintenance, if there was better documentation available, it would have assisted us quite a bit better to say, was the service provided more efficiently and effectively? Because we do compare it against either a policy or an ideal situation or whatever the case might be. So if we could have seen that there was timesheets showing how we have used the Cuban staff in a better way in making sure that we occupy them, that would really have assisted during our assessment. When we look at vocational training, I think there's different professions being dealt with differently. In terms of the STEM students, it's quite regulated, and it was therefore easier for the AG to say exactly what is the difference and can you come back and then register with your professional body in South Africa to be able to practice. And if you look at that, it is something that one can identify to say, yes, our students are studying much longer when they go to Cuba, because remember, it's also including a Spanish year that they need to do because the studies are being done in Spanish, and then compare it to the South African background. And I think Edward already also raised it to indicate that yes, the defense are in this situation, but they are already dealing with some of the students that came back, which we should now make sure that they can qualify in South Africa and practice in South Africa. Although for irregular expenditure or cost was not included, when we do the economy analysis, we did include all the direct as well as the indirect costs, because it's important to also consider those specific allowances and the travel costs during the assessment. I think in terms of Hebron and Boli covered the vials were returned to Cuba. So it's no longer in South Africa. And then I think the last thing that I just quickly want to highlight, especially when we talk about prime mission equipment, that it's important that for a company to be able to do major services, they need to be regarded as a product support supplier by the original equipment manufacturer. So in using the Cuban staff that comes to South Africa, they are more used on a day-to-day maintenance type of contract than really the bigger repair and refurbishment contracts. I am going to just pause there and give over to Edward. Thank you, Edward.
Thank you very much, Krishna. And maybe just the item that I picked up, also requiring responses, just in terms of the internal processes and investigations. So the irregular expenditure in relation to this project is still currently in process. The irregular expenditure would remain in the annual report disclosed by the department until such time as all the processes, which include possible consequence management and so forth, have been fully concluded. So we are keeping in touch with the department as part of our normal audit process. We also follow up on progress in terms of irregular expenditure and subsequent condonement thereof. So it's still in progress. And in terms of the Hebron at this stage, in terms of internal processes, we are not aware of any conclusion on investigation and actions being taken. Thank you. I think it's the items that we could identify, but we'll revert back to yourself and members if there's any further clarification required. Thank you.
Thanks, Edward. Chair, I think we covered all the questions. I just wanted to reiterate the importance of the needs assessment and the cost-benefit analysis. I think some of the questions that were asked is in terms of some of the additional skills that you would get from utilizing international resources if we don't have that. But if we don't see that analysis in terms of what are you actually measuring and what is it against, it is difficult. So it is important that that needs assessment and that cost-benefit analysis is performed so that we are also able to measure the qualitative considerations that the department would have considered in terms of implementing the bilateral agreement that they've entered into. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Office of the Auditor General. We will now proceed to our next presentation by the department. You are welcome also to the Office of the Auditor General to know what is the briefing from the department in relation to Project Kalo, which is a success of Project Thusano in terms of the recommendation that the department reviews the current existing contract so that we can look at the cost-benefit analysis and look at how we can save the little resources we have. But from my point as chair, I would like to make the following observations that I think there's going to be a need from you as the AGSA to meet even fortnightly or monthly with the department on this program of the newly reviewed one of Kalo, but you also sit down with the department to review all the audit findings which were in Project Thusano, clear them and close them so that they don't recur over the next medium-term expenditure framework of our next audit findings, audit outcomes, so that we close the chapter of Project Thusano. The issue related to consequence management and other criminal points, I'm happy that they are referred to the SANDF and other institutions. That one will be dealt with so that we don't get into that particular point. But I think from the side of us as a portfolio committee, in our oversight visits that we're going to embark on, we will have to get the department to show us the output of Project Thusano, particularly the repair vehicles and its impact in terms of ensuring that we improve the capabilities of our National Defence Force. The other point that I would want us to look at with the department is the Auditor General of South Africa. I know we are a Chapter 9 institution, I can't give instructions to you, but we are requesting that we do a workshop or an awareness campaign for our generals in all units, officers, including everybody who deals with supply chain or logistics in the department. Just on the role of the Auditor General, the authority of the Auditor General, the mandate of the Auditor General, and just an analysis of the past 10 years or 15 years of AG's findings in the National Defence Force and potential recommendations that the Auditor General can advise the National Defence Force to correct for the future, so that we don't delay until we are told that the irregular expenditure in the National Defence Force is 16 billion rand, and when we could have kept before it reaches those proportions. We can't wait until that particular point is done. The other point is to, through our audit executive from the AG's office, to help us develop a remedial action plan of how to deal with all costs that led to this big irregular expenditure, so that we answer one by one, point by point, to all the AG's findings, because we have not made any different law for the National Defence Force. We are all still accounting through the PFMA. So I think it's going to be important that through that PFMA regulations, that we develop a remedial action that answers all the queries that led to the 16 billion and clear every point by point, so that we don't have them recurring for the next 5 years or the next 2 years. So that will be my summary related to this. We can now move to the next presentation. Over to you, the department. Briefing by the Chief of the South African National Defence Force and the Chief Finance Officer of the DOD on the new contract signed under Project Thusano with effect from January 2025, what it entails, how it differs from the previous contracts, and how it addresses the previous AGSA findings. Thank you very much, and over to you, the department.
Thank you, Chairperson. I hope that the accounting officer, in particular the Secretary for Defense, is on the platform. I think she would be the relevant person, together with the CFO and the commander of the SANDF, to lead the presentation. I say so because we have a new general in the logistics section. CLOG is a very new fellow. So we need those who have an institutional memory, and also to respond to what the AG had said. Perhaps the accounting officer will also inform the portfolio committee as to what steps have they taken, or the department has taken, since the Auditor General tabled its report last year. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Good morning, members of the PPD. Thank you, DM Olomisa, and greetings to the chair as well. I'm Dr. Gamede, the Acting Secretary for Defense. I'm sitting here with the Chief of Staff of the South African National Defence Force, General Ramantswana, the Chief Logistics, Admiral Mkhonto, and the CFO, Mr. Apotsi, as well as General Mtsweni, who has institutional memory, who will be making a presentation. I need just to respond on before I give to General Ramantswana, on the Heberon interferon matter, that this matter, members will be aware. In the 6th administration, the Minister of Defense appointed a ministerial task team to look at this matter, and it was also referred to the Public Protector, and the Secretary for Defense then referred it to the SIU to do a deep investigation on it. Tomorrow I have a meeting with the SIU. They informed me that they are winding up the report. So that's as far as where we are with the interferon, the Cuban drug. And now I am going to give to the general to just give an outline of what they have done on the matter of Thusano. I must just indicate, as the Auditor General has indicated, that the Minister, Modise, at the time, instructed the MCC, the Military Command Council, to review the contract so that the contract has those things that we need, as well as to make sure that the contract is addressing the concerns that were raised by the Auditor General. So I'll give it to Chief of Staff to give an introduction to what has been done before the presentation. General Ramantswane, through you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, SANDF, and thanks to the TM, Chairperson, honorable members. Thanks for the opportunity. If you allow me, Chairperson, I'm just going to take 3 minutes, not more than that. I can promise you just 3 minutes for me to kind of provide some bit of background into this project. I know how the presentation looks like. It's got some background, but not exactly what I want to say. I want to say that we integrated 1994, and upon integration, there were some structural studies that were done. Those structural studies led to something that was called outsourcing. In other words, outsourcing of what is core business, outsourcing of non-core business, while retaining and building capacity for ourselves for what is within our core business. Now, in outsourcing, one of the areas that fell into the areas of outsourcing was the one within the technical environment. And what that means was reliance on defense industry. And how did it then went about within the Department of Defense? What has then happened is that we had a situation that developed. And that situation was that we had to take our fleet for repairs by industry. And we also, at the time, were undergoing budgetary cuts without any money. Money is there, but very minimal. So the minute you take these ones, your prime mission equipment to industry, for repairs, obviously you are highly dependent on industry. What then happened is price increases, which became unmanageable at the time. Whilst we have got budget cuts, and those who were within the Department of Defense were being taken by industry, and some of whom left the department and formed their own new career path for themselves to survive because they had the skills. This situation was not nice for the Defense Force. And let me take it a step further and say, we were being advised when it comes to certain issues within the technical core to say, X number of vehicles are beyond repair. They must be disposed. Remember, we're suffering from price increases. X number of vehicles must be disposed. These vehicles and that must be disposed. When the vehicles are being disposed, they are being sold. I won't tell you to who. But these were the realities of the time. And they were being sold. So all of this became so much unaffordable. There were discussions that took place. And this was with industry. So if you say we need to commission or to do a study of what is in the market, I'm answering that question by saying, when we went to Project Thusano, we were from the market. And it had to be that there must be new initiative. The other downside on the side of the defense force was that when this thing is happening, let's recall we've got a commandate at the Department of Defense, and that mandate is one of defending and protecting the country. We will not have time in a war situation or in a conflict situation to ask industry to deploy with us as we were outsourcing all this repair and maintenance, losing skills, suffering from budget cuts. And then we are going to ask civilians to say, you come with us, we are going into a combat zone. It is not going to happen. So we were faced with a choice. Either we sit back and not do anything about the situation, or sit back and continue to allow that which was happening within the industry sector of charging us exorbitant prices when we do not have the money that was available to us. So this as a background, and it's a very, very important background. I need to say that at the time we struggled and we had to do something, we had to move. And in moving, it was to source where can we seek help for a number of reasons. One of it, the exodus of technical skills that we had. The secondly, how do we free ourselves from these exorbitant costs by industry? When we went to the Cubans, then the discussion started. Wherein it was, why are you going there, but you've got your own industry in the country? And of this discussion, nobody was mentioning the fact that, but you are running away from it. We were not saying that. But we knew exactly what was happening. Disposing a vehicle. Now, this is what happened. The Cubans came in. Imagine if we were to dispose of a tank transporter. How much does a tank transporter take? Some were declared beyond economic repair. And by the way, they had to be put online for disposal. The Cubans came, one vehicle in one day, they were done with it, which was declared beyond economic repair. And it was moving. And all of us were shocked. I need to say that. So there has to be an initiative moving forward. When you are under siege, you've got to take initiatives in order to move forward. And that is where the initiative of Project Thusano came in. Now, commissioning a study, this is what the SANDF was mentioning. The minister did say, she gave an instruction, and what we have just done with Project Kalo, the new one, it's a response based on that analysis that was being done internally in the Department of Defense. Based on the Auditor General's findings, something that I must mention while the Auditor General is here. By the way, it was not the first time when the Auditor General has audited this project. The Auditor General has audited this project the first time. And in their findings, there was nothing about any irregularity, except to say that the signature that stood there of the Chief of the Defense Force makes the whole thing irregular because he did not have the authority to sign. But then it was proven to the auditors that the chief had a delegation, which was given to him to sign the contract. So then the whole thing fell flat. They did went and audited the second time, and then they came back to say, no, look, there is this problem, which we have found as the auditors. All right, we are ready to move with it, and we are ready to say it is in our interest as well to review and to move forward without us beginning to fight with our colleagues from the Auditor General. But this is where we are coming from, Chairperson. So I need to say, if we tested the market, this is a question that's being asked. I said, we are from the market. We were in the market at the time. And we came out of the market, given the situation that we find ourselves in. The procurement process, I won't talk about this because there is going to be a presentation that's going to be done. What is it that the department has done? The new contract, I am happy, honorable members, and we are ready and willing to work with Auditor General as they look into Project Kalo to see what is it compliance? There's no problem with that. And the auditors are very much aware that we are always working with them in order to ensure that we get, they audit us for us in order to at least we need to be held accountable. That much we've got an understanding on it. So this is where we are in terms of this project, and I don't want to go ahead of the presentation. I believe there is a lot that we will still discuss after the presentation has been done, but that as a background. And I need to say that we were in a painful situation as the Department of Defense. And where we are, I say again, I've once said that we have called, invited the Portfolio Committee on Defense. And at the time, we told them, they were taken through they were taken to where the project was taking place in some of the centers, and they saw for themselves what is happening. After the presentation, then one will have to throw some more light into, based on the presentation and based on the questions that are going to come up. Let me hand over at this point, Chairperson, and thank you for my 3 minutes. Hopefully I haven't eaten much of the time. Let me hand over to Brigadier General Mutsweni. He is under command of the Chief of Logistics, and he will then take us through the presentation. General Mutsweni, over to you.
Oh, no, sorry, before General, it's through the chair. You can't hand over to another general.
Thank you, Chairperson. My apologies.
It should be done through the chair.
Thank you, Chairperson.
My relationship with you, it's command and order. So I'm ordering you that do it through the chair. Thank you.
Chairperson, it's well taken. My apology through the chair. I hand over to General Mutsweni. Thank you, Chairperson.
Good morning, Chairperson. I'll continue with the presentation, and I recognize all the protocol. My presentation scope is actually flash. I'm not going to go through the whole of it, but it is what it is there on the screen. The meaning of Kala is derived from the word Kala, which is Khalahari, the Kalahari Desert, which is meaning the Great Desert. But in essence, Project Kalo aims for the horizon. In terms of the background, I won't dwell much on the background because I think the Chief of Staff has made the whole background in terms of where we are coming from, in terms of where we are now, and why we actually took the steps to ensure that we resuscitate our capabilities through Project Thusano. Suffice to say, I also want to state that we are governed by the constitutional mandate, which actually says that we primarily protect the sovereignty of our country, and that actually ensures that the SANDF must endeavor to be self-sustainable in order for us to be able to fulfill our mandate. And that actually made us to be able to ensure that we explore and look at ourselves and ensure that we capacitate ourselves and be able to ensure that we revitalize our capabilities that were lost through the outsourcing. And also, we must also take into consideration that there were new demands that were actually placed on our defense force, such as the riots, the disaster management, illegal mining, and also the pandemic that actually ensured that we had to use a lot of our resources. With that, also the changing geopolitical, geostrategic, political, and military alignments necessitated the defense force to be able to seek military cooperation with the countries which will collaborate with us to capacitate ourselves. So we concluded that we should be able to take this and be able to ensure that the non-viable defense industry and unstable economy was not the best solution, as the Chief of Staff has alluded to. Now, that is why we actually went to the bilateral agreement, which was signed by the ministry in 2012. And that is, it actually gave rise to the existence of Project Thusano. Now, the very much important thing here is that the desired future outcome of Project Kalo is to capacitate the SANDF through professional skills development that enhances innovation for self-sustainability, which ensures that our vision to the journey to greatness. Now, as you know, that Project Thusano ended in 2025 in January. So there were also few of the objectives which were not fully met, which is the preservation, simulation projects, and maintenance and repair of our prime mission equipment. So in Project Kalo, we seek to improve on the lesson learned from Thusano, whilst ensuring that it improves on innovation and fosters capacity for a self-sustainable SANDF. I must stress that with the engagement with the AGSA, we seek to ensure that we comply with the treasury regulations and the PFMA. Now, this is the cost benefit and the comparison that we did through the project. I must say that from 2009, where we were with the industry, and we started the project Thusano in 2015. And in the 6 years that we did, we actually spent 1 billion of that, as compared to the 2 billion that we spent with the industry. Now, going forward, as we look at the entire of the project, if we look at the Thusano, we spent 3 billion, and in the projection that we made, if we stayed with the industry, we should have spent 8 billion, and then the savings that we have is actually 5 billion. Now, if we look at the projections of Thusano, the expenditure of Thusano in 10 years we spent 3 billion, and then the total projection of Kalo, we are going to spend 537 million for over the period of 5 years. And then we have the total savings from the 2 contracts of 82.3%. That is 2.5 billion. Now, if we look at how the contract itself is structured, this is the costings of what is in the contract. It amounts to $28.2 million. In rands is 537, as I've mentioned, for the period of 5 years. Now, going forward, here we flash what we did in terms of the Project Thusano. In terms of the job cards, we did 18.498 of the job cards, and the labor cost is as indicated, with the total costs of savings of 258.5 million that we have actually gained. This is only on the job cards. Now, going forward to the gaining of experience and exposure to Thusano involve the skills transfer in multiple disciplines. We are talking about medical aviation and the technicians that we have trained. Now, we have trained the total number of artisans of 3,227, and then the apprentices of 513, which is the total number that we have trained is 3,740 of our members. Now, this is a breakdown of what we have trained members in Cuba with the different programs outlined and on the left of the presentation. Now, we have trained a total of 261 of our members in Cuba from the Army. And then in the Air Force, we have trained a number of 74 members with the following courses or programs: the pilots and the engineers in aeronautics and the technologists that we did, and also we concentrated on air traffic controllers. The Navy came late in the program. We only sent them last year. So we are going to train them in these different disciplines that are outlined. We have a total number of 12 members who are actually undergoing a course. There's, in the military health services, we have a total number of 74 members trained in the disciplines that are outlined on the programs. Now, the cost savings compared to the local interest, I think we have managed to save a lot of billions as I've outlined. And then the prime mission equipment that were actually restored and maintained were able to enable the SANDF to be able to respond to the pandemic and also other things that and the operations that the Defense Force was obliged to do. And we also had the Cuban Brigade during the pandemic. That is the Cuban Medical Brigade that helped us during the pandemic. Now there's a significant number of cadets that has been qualified through the project. I must say that the arrangement that we have with the Cubans includes tuition, accommodation, food, transport, the medical cover, and inclusive also there is the prescribed books that they need during the programs. The objectives of Thusano were the skills transfer and training in preservation of prime mission equipment, innovative mindset solution training, technical maintenance and repair, skills transfer in simulation design, installation and maintenance. And then we also had the building of technical capacity to meet the SANDF objectives of being innovative and self-sustaining amidst the budget cuts and constraints. Now, coming to the AGSA findings, how did we actually try to address them? We have revised the tariffs of the contract itself. And besides that, we managed to ensure that we only have a singular contract with fixed and objectives that are managed by different services on the ground. We also have a financial risk management framework that's been established through the GRC and the Directorate of Procurement Management, which actually monitors the reports that are generated through monitoring and evaluation of the project itself. We also are going to, with the cooperation and collaboration with the AGSA, we are going to ensure that the domestic laws are being complied with as prescribed by National Treasury. And we are going to implement procurement by other means to ensure that the contract is in line. I must also say that with the savings that we actually made, it was because of the two contracts are different in a sense that Project Thusano had two contracts, which is the technical and maintenance services by the Cubans themselves, and also the vocational training that was actually there. Now, with the vocational training being going to be managed by HR in terms of the foreign learning opportunities. Now that is where we actually saved a lot of money in terms of this project. So we then saying that we are adhering to the recommendations of AGSA in terms of what they have filed. So the issue of comparative service providers is addressed in the criteria of using the procurement by other means, where it actually justifies the project of this station cannot be catered for by the local industry as summarized by the Chief of Staff. Now, if we look at the difference between the two contracts, this one, that is Project Kalo, will focus mainly on the provision of the professional technical services by the Cuban specialists. And we focus mainly on skills transfer. Now, as I've said, the vocational training is no more going to be there. This is only a binding contract with the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Cuba with regards to the provision of technical services to the SANDF. The HALA is made, its aim is to ensure that we bridge the gap and conclude the project that are still outstanding from the previous contract, which is the simulation, the preservation, that is actually was not actually realized in the previous contract. Now we are continuing with furthering of the capacitation of our technical service corps in a form of skills transfer and collaboration. The teams from different services will lead the processes in ensuring that monitoring and evaluation of set objectives are met within the required timelines. Like we said, Project Kalo has reduced tariffs, and based on those reduced tariffs, we have also some of the members that were there, especially the leader group. We had 5 leader group in Project Thusano. Now we only have 3. And then the administration of the contract was also revised to enhance efficiency in terms of value for money. Now, Project Kalo entails compliance of domestic and international law by establishing a sound accounting and compliance of the prescripts through the procurement by other means. We have reduced the tariffs, as we said, but most importantly, Project Kalo is aimed at capacitating ourselves in order for us to be able to be self-sustainable and to ensure that we achieve our vision of journey to greatness. Now, also we primarily based ourselves in terms of the professional and technical training that will be given through skills transfer of our members. The detailed scope of the project is the technical maintenance and repair, the preservation, the skills transfer, design and innovation programs through the simulation programs that we are going to have, and also the provision of skills and transfer and the development of our capabilities. We will focus on the logistics in terms of the technical aspects of sustainability model of the primary equipment, and not on student capacitation. That one is going to be led by the foreign learning opportunity framework. And I thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm giving it back to the Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Accounting Officer. That is the presentation from the department related to Project Kalo. I would now like to get hands from honorable members in terms of questions that they'd like to raise. I will just start introducing members just to raise the following points. In the findings of the AG on Project Thusano, there was a point raised on quality assurance and the relationship between professional bodies in South Africa. In the case of Project Thusano was the issue of SAPRA accreditations. Now, I just want to find out from Kalo as a project, whether in any engineering courses that we're doing, in any aviation courses we're doing, in any other related courses that we're doing in Cuba, what is the relationship between us through this program and accreditation by our professional bodies in the country? Just to be practical, if we've trained an engineer in Cuba, can that engineer be accredited as an engineering practitioner in terms of Engineering Council of South Africa? Would he, according to our contents here, get the necessary credits for accreditation in our country? Because that is what was raised by the OG, that when we start programs, we don't measure them against our internal capacity as a country. So I just want to find out in this new skills transfer that we are referring to in Project Kalo, was that done? Looking at the cost-benefit analysis of this program, that we almost spent about in the past at something like 1.6 billion on the program, and almost 6 billion rand over 1.6 regular, but almost 6 billion rand expenditure on over a period of 10 years. Isn't it about time that we must have our own technical colleagues in the National Defence Force that will train our own technical service corps? Because the expenditure we are spending is almost the same as any other institution of higher. Isn't it about time that we work on establishing our own colleagues so that all these accredited courses, we can either do them with one of the vocational training institutions in the country, in higher teaching, by being accredited, being within the National Defence Force for our members in terms of the required skills, so that we look at a sustainable model. I will now hand over to members who have questions. See Honorable Kanye House, Honorable Hatton, Honorable Sokrani, Honorable Tambi, in that order. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And Chair, I want to thank especially the Chief of Staff of the SANDF for the background that he provided to us, because I think it was extremely important. Chief of Staff, if I understood you correctly, you said when you did this analysis, you came to the conclusion that you do not have, in terms of the local industry, a reliable possible partner that can assist you with skills transfer and the capacitation of your own people in the SANDF. So, Chair, if I understand that statement correctly, we're dealing here with the classical comparison between insourcing and outsourcing. And what the Chief of Staff was referring to was a skills transfer that assists the SANDF to maintain skills and upgrade skills within the SANDF, and therefore we deal about insourcing. I fear that some of the presentation that we received from the AG seems to make a comparison between apples and pears. When we talk about the domestic industry and its ability to perhaps service vehicles at a cheaper rate, we were not talking about the same kind of skills transfer and therefore insourcing. And I think in that sense, the AG's report failed us. But Chair, I also think that there is a problem from the side of the SANDF. The SANDF seems to have been incapable of being able to provide to the AG a proper needs and cost assessment. And that made it very difficult for the AG to do a proper assessment of the quality of this project. And you see, General, and I'm talking here to the Chief of Staff, sometimes we are our own worst enemies. I really think it would have been important, and I hope you're still able, to provide that full needs and cost assessment, because that will help to explain also this issue of skills insourcing and skills outsourcing that I've just referred to. General, I think it is also very important that for the sake of Project Kalo, we make sure that you comply with all the various PFMA regulations. It is critical because we all agree that the PFMA must be applicable under all circumstances. I want to conclude, Chair, by urging the SANDF to assist in terms of the assessment of this unique project with Cuba, by making sure that all the relevant information is recorded and making sure that it is available, so that when the AG does an assessment of this project and compare also Project Kalo with Project Thusano, it is able to do so on an understanding of the real benefits that the SANDF had gained from this project. I conclude now. I think we are dealing with a situation where the SANDF is telling us we cannot rely on the patriotism of local domestic industry and its provisions. We need a more reliable partner. And that reliable partner we are finding in Cuba. But then it must be properly documented so that we all can understand what has been benefited by Project Thusano and also what will now be benefited by Project Kalo. Chair, in a recent presentation to SCOPA, we were told that there are certain private sector companies where a huge amount of local skills by those who worked for the SANDF and now had been extracted from the SANDF. And that you find now that those projects are being run in the United Arab Emirates and that board meetings are being conducted in Afrikaans in the UAE. This is, I think, exactly the problem that Project Thusano, and I hope now more effectively, Project Kalo has been trying to address. And I sincerely hope that this issue of skills insourcing and skills outsourcing and a proper comparison of the two and the benefit that the SANDF is getting from this engagement with Cuba can be properly documented. So I extend a challenge to the SANDF not to be your own worst enemies, but to be your own best friends, and therefore make sure that you fully comply with the PFMA and make sure that you document the success of this project in detail, so that when issues are being raised about expenditure and so-called fruitless expenditure, which in these circumstances I don't think can yet be fully concluded, you will be able to provide us with the real information. So please help yourselves and help us in order to make sure that insourcing and self-capacitation will become the norm of the day in the SANDF. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Hatem, in that order.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I don't think there can be a bigger difference between the presentation or the situation that we are looking at, projects Thusano and Kalo. A bigger difference between the presentation we had from the AG and the one that the marketing one that we had now from the Department of Defense. They simply cannot coexist next to each other. It's an anomaly. And it appears that perhaps the Department of Defense didn't look into this when they presented this to us. I would like to have an objective and very deliberate opinion of the AG on the presentation that was given to us, because it shouts against it other. Nothing that reflected in the previous presentation, the massive cost involved, and in comparison to the South African option, actually is contained in the Department of Defense presentation. It is actually, I can't believe it happened. So I would like to get an explanation. And may I add that in more than 2 decades, I've never found any department that was able to prove that the Auditor General of South Africa in their findings and their discussions is wrong. So I must say that I have to look at the presentation that we've just received very, very skeptical, and I found it some of the aspects that were mentioned, figures that were mentioned, as not reliable. I cannot believe them. Right. Then and I would like to get an explanation. For instance, in the comparative figures between the Cuban option and the South African option, how was this analysis done? Are the calculations, is it open for us? Can we get the comparative figures? And I must say that anecdotal quotes doesn't really impress. We need the scientific factual basis for this argument. I simply do not trust that what was given to us. Coming then to the applicability of laws and the Treasury, the PFMA and the Treasury regulations, the department had more than a decade with various Auditor General's reports to get their house in order. They did not. They continued above the law, accumulating literally billions in irregular expenditure, 1.7 billion. Above the law, not complying with anything. Even if it's in the contract that local laws, South African Cuban law should be adhered to, they did not. Now, by changing this animal's name from Thusano to Kalo, it remains the same animal. The same laws, PFMA and Treasury regulations are still applicable. With assurance, and there's nothing in this document, can be given that suddenly the department will find themselves now within the law and not outside of the law. The cost benefit, and I've already referred to that, and the cost benefit comparison and the needs analysis. We have to relook at that. It doesn't make sense if you read it next to the AG's findings, as well as if we go to the options and the training that's been happening in the Cuba. It doesn't talk to the AG's findings, and this is historical findings. It's not the promises that we are used to be getting at this time of the year with the budgets and with annual performance plans. We need to get the stats, and it needs to speak to each other. And if there's has been an intervention to get better figures, to get a better output, to get a better result of South Africa, then we should actually learn that. Reality is, Honourable Chairperson, there's a blame being put on the NEL, not directly, but by implication, because the NEL is the original equipment manufacturer of much of our equipment. And because of outsourcing this to a foreign country, creating jobs in a foreign country, for a foreign country, they now had to lay off many of its staff. And now, and actually had to sell off equipment that they were not using because of the outsourcing to Cuba. And now they are being blamed by the very same organization that contributed to their decline, that they are not able to fulfill the contracts. So I have to repeat what I said earlier in the AGSA presentation. There is a new route, and that is to grow our economy and to create jobs in South Africa, not in another country. That's our mission. And the financial arguments being put forward by the SANDF doesn't make sense. And therefore, it cries against the route that we have engaged on, with a massive unemployment figures in our country. With we haven't got growth figures. It's the worst in Southern Africa, most probably the worst in Africa, and we still are bolstering up another country's production performance. So then mention was made to the journey of greatness, and then also creating independence. If a decade and 3 billion could not have contributed to this, what will now suddenly change in 2025? Mention was made that we can't maintain our equipment in a combat situation, which is actually, that argument is actually confusing the whole debate. It's not about major maintenance, it's about the day-to-day maintenance that happen, like the way the soldiers clean their rifles. Drivers need to, and support staff need to service their vehicles every day, every morning. And that for the bigger services, we need the equipment and the training that we get at the bases. And there's no indication that we have benefited from this in the past decade. There's no skills transfer, and the preservation of our main battle equipment is another debate. But simply our equipment is not being properly maintained, and it's not being properly preserved. I would like us to engage on this presentation further, but we have to get some independent input, because what we've seen here is simply not reliable. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Hatting, Honourable Sokanyile.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me greet you. Let me observe the protocol in the platform. Chairperson, our question, I think all of us, will center around this huge budget cut.
if you are going to compare Project Kalo with Project Thusano, then looking at Project Thusano, because you move on a premise of Project Thusano, but it had that huge amount for its budget. Now, there's a huge cut on the estimates for Project Kalo. I want the department, they allay our fears that we're not going to find ourselves being asked to top up on the budget because maybe the budget didn't foresee this and that. Because to me, there's a huge cut as compared to this, to Project Thusano. Because to me, if they were saying that we're leaving the Project Thusano, we're starting a new project, Kalo, then there wouldn't be a comparison. And having the huge irregular expenditure that AG has talked about it, even now, talked about those huge irregular expenditure, and we've made this dramatic cut, then I'm saying that what is our pride having Project Thusano now that we're moving to Project Kalo? Project Kalo will concentrate on professional technical skills. Are those technical skills will be accredited after those people have got them, so that they don't sit there. Those skills are not accredited here. Can they confirm to us that they've done their homework? And also, having to cut this huge budget. If Project Kalo fails, do we have a contingency plans having cut this budget with Project Thusano? Because to me, I'm a layman. I'm saying that you move from Project Thusano having this big budget, but you cannot dramatically cut unless you're saying that that money wasn't doing anything. I don't want to say that because now I'm concentrating on Project Kalo. So can they tell us that they have plans if it fails, so that we don't take poor people and say that we're giving them professional technical skills and then it ends on the way? Do they have contingency plans? Chair, thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Whip. Now take Honorable Tambi.
Thank you, Chairperson, for the opportunity. I said earlier that I will reserve my rights to comment on the AGS report. I'll start there at slide 12 of AGSA report presentation on material irregularities on the procurement of the airborne drugs. There's an acknowledgement that the drugs were repatriated back to Cuba on January 2022 that prevented the financial loss amounting to 226.8 million. So I'm looking at the time period. Then 30 September, there was a PP report that recommended remedial action, including consequence management. So the question that comes to the accounting officer is this: who were the officials involved in this? And did actually the department implemented consequence management as recommended by the public protector? And if indeed the department did that, what were the outcomes of such DC inquiries? And then secondly, on the same matter, it said that certain remedial actions were referred to the SIU on 30 October 2022. I'm looking at the time lapse from October 2022 to date being the 12th of March 2025, almost 3 years later. And then I find it very disturbing that the accounting officer is just telling us that she's only going to meet with the SIU tomorrow. I had expected chair in this meeting for the progress on the civil litigation proceedings right today in this meeting, given the time lapse. And then also, I want also the accounting officer, because this is the information that she has at her disposal. Can she then share with us here in this meeting the statuses of such cases? And I want to know how much is involved and how many officials are involved. And then I also want to understand, where are these officials? As they still in the system, continuing with their life like it's business as usual? These are the issues that I want to understand, Chair. Also, I think it's just to get to add on what the other colleagues have raised. And on the issue of the value for money, from now we're transitioning from Project Thusano and then now Project Kalo. And then I should think I need the accounting officer, maybe or the chief of defense view on this matter, to say then, if indeed the Project Kalo will indeed realize savings. I've seen that the auditor general, they're saying they will be busy with the audit on that one. I also need to see, also to get assurance from the colleagues from the department, whether this indeed they are done, also checking the physical constraints that the department finds itself, and also the issue of building a local capacity. Chairperson and the other colleagues, remember we attended the AADD 2024. You realize that there's so much capacity in this country that the department is not utilizing. I would like to get their view on these matters. And also to emphasize the issue that Honorable Sokanyele has raised, because each project, once you embark on, look at the impact. Did Project Thusano actually had an impact on the issue of the South African national personnel? I'm raising this to say, are the things that out of this project, having spent such huge amounts of money, is there something that I think the chief of the national defense will be able to talk to it to say, what were the benefits of this project? What is it that you can showcase to say, out of this partnership, this is what we have successfully achieved? It's something that you can brag about. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Lapis, followed by Honorable Shidembe.
Thank you, Chair.
Time is running out. We still have to go.
Yeah, no, Chair,
budget.
I will not be long, Chair.
Okay.
I've been covered by most of my colleagues, but I think, Chair, it's important that what this remarkable percentage drop, we should, as a committee, get itemized layout on where the savings have been done. If you got 82.3% on savings in this project, it is, as my colleague have said, I think it is remarkable, unbelievable. So we should maybe have, because here we are comparing apples with apples. We're not comparing apples with pears. So we should have that comparison as the defense force as to where are we making our savings, where is the saving, and also it get put into itemized layout for us, Comrade Chair. Secondly, Chair, also the issue of the transferred skills. We must be able to be told that here is where the skills have been transferred from year to year. This is what we have. We have more here now. Our problem is no longer here; it's there. So that we understand when they say the benefits, and I think my colleague Faith Matambi have now raised it, to say that what have been the real benefit out of this project for South Africa, so that we feel that we must continue it. I understand the background that was given in the beginning, but we want to see what is really the real benefit, Chair. I will stop there, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Shadambi.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson. What is concerning here is that when are we going to see the department being able to do, such, things on their own, considering that from 2012 to 2025, the South African Defence Force has been relying to the Cuban. Now, I think 15 years, is too much that we are still relying there, and now we are changing. My concern, is that since there has been a number of irregularities, how can the department make a commitment, the department itself make a commitment that these irregularities that have been taking place is not going to be repeated again? If they can commit that maybe at the end of this financial, because we are starting the new financial year, at the end of the next coming financial year, we won't see any more irregularities in this in the SANDF with regard to the Cuban. The last one, Chair, if maybe the department can tell us more about the status of reliability of the 10,779 military vehicles that were repaired and maintained through Project Thusano. I need that if they can tell us the status of reliability, whether they were just fixed, but they are still not, usable and serviceable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Shelembe. I'll give the department at least 10 minutes to respond before I close, make my findings. Over to you, the department, but will also allow the Auditor General also of the department to raise salient points that we all need to take home. Thank you. Over to the department.
Thank you very much, again, Chair. I will allow the Chief of Logistics to respond to the questions. But the SIU, Honorable Mutambi, when I said I'm only meeting with them tomorrow, it's not the first time, but we have been providing information. They request information, we have been providing information. So tomorrow is they are going to give us the update. Like I'm saying, they are winding up now the report. As to consequence management, the consequence management will then be guided by the recommendations of the report. The reason why the previous or former Secretary for Defense sent requested the SIU to do a deeper investigation is because there were areas that were not clear in the PP's in the public protection report. So this report, once it's out, then we are hoping that because it's a deep investigation, we will be able to move forward. So it's not for the first time we have been interacting, we have been providing information. At some point, the SIU, we gave the SIU an office to sit here and go through the files of certain people that would have been involved in making decisions about the heparin drug. So I'll give General Manswali to respond on the other operational matter. Sorry, Silo to respond.
Okay. Chairperson, thank you very much. I am going to address some of the issues, and then Chief Logistic also has the appetite to respond to some of the issues, so I'll give him that opportunity. Chairperson, I just need to say that Honorable Niehaus, from what he was saying, indeed, Honorable Niehaus, I think you are spot on, and one would like to say that moving forward, as you indicated, that the Defence Force needed to take the challenge. One cannot agree with you more. I think that's the line that we will have to look at. As we indicated, though, the fact that, by the way, we were from industry coming into the project. But nonetheless, Honorable Niehaus, I want to say that your points have been positively taken by ourselves. And I need to answer another question, which is very, very critical. It is the value and the impact of the project as we have it. And indeed, we have got measurable objectives. There's certain things that are very difficult to measure. And those things are qualitative in nature. We can talk about statistics and how many of the people who have deployed were in which sectors within the Department of Defense. For example, I can say to you how many of those graduates from the skills transfer from the Cuban contract have been moved to certain field workshops. And there we've got around 109. We've moved some of them to the mobilization centers, to regional workshops, and so on. I can go down the line. But important to mention, Chair, is the 42 of the mechanical engineers that we have deployed to Janelle at this point in time. These are your mechanical engineers that we've deployed them there. It is going to be enhancing of the skills and the support that we can get reciprocally between ourselves and Janelle. So they are there. And not only that, we already, as we move forward, of course, we've got a plan to work with CSIR as well. And that will be something that will also still be beneficial in terms of this. And we also have looked at our retention strategy in terms of this, because we know we have learned lessons as we suffered with some of the skills loss that we were having within the Department of Defense. And as well, I need to say that, Chairperson, if it was not for this project, and I want to say this, to say that the Defense Force probably was not going to be able to move. Probably we were not going to have capabilities that would be deployed in any of the situations, whether it's internal or external. We probably were not going to have that. But this project has assisted In terms of the skills that we have gained, there are in certain workshops where the supervision is being done by our own members. So we have made a lot of progress in terms of this. We were not going to be able to have that. And that is for real, that's for sure. We are deploying now in certain missions. I need to say, even the products that we have from this project, some of these members are deployed, they are in the DRC as we speak, coming from this project, which of course has been our aim to say that we need to get into this. So the impact and the change that we have made, though we cannot measure some of them, they are qualitative, us having skills into our members. And we have also communicated this message to Auditor General. You cannot measure a skill that a person has. I don't know how. I stand to be corrected on that, but you cannot measure it. What you just have to know, you see the quality of the outputs of the people as they continue to do their work. This is where the impact is, because we have cut so much of the reliance elsewhere and focusing internally. And I want to link this, by the way, with a question that was asked by Honorable Harting. And Honorable Harting indicates the fact that, but within Dinel have lost skills. Honorable Harting, Dinel have lost skills in very, very critical areas. In the environment of design and development. Now, when you design, it talks to your data packs, it talks to a number of things in designing. And that is where that has started. And of course, they've told us to say that if you give us money, you give us work, then we will be able to source in the skills. So these are two different environments that we are talking about. And as the Defence Force, we would like to see an improved and a better Dinel moving forward. Let me check if there is any other, because my colleagues also wants to respond into some of the things. I think, Honorable Blakis, we have taken note of your concern. You spoke about the breakdown. To say that the saving is huge, but I want to say this, Honorable Blakis, and the honorable members, to say that the saving is huge. We had 2 contracts. Now we've got 1 contract, and that 1 contract also trimmed down. It has been trimmed in a number of areas, from the tariffs themselves to the manpower that we have from the Cubans. Very much trimmed. And let's not forget something. We're no longer going to be sending our people to Cuba. One of the major cost drivers would have been that. But we are no longer sending them there. So they are not going there. Nobody is going there now. And we know that we still had a leg that had to be completed. As I indicated in one of the meetings with the PCD, that we just have got to complete that leg. So that is where we are. But I need to say, Honorable Plagi, that the point you are raising is not only assisting to the committee, but it's also assisting ourselves, and it's an area which we are going to be looking at. So on that one, I just need to say, let's note as well where the bulk of the cost is. There is an issue around accreditation. On the issue of accreditation, maybe just to say it this way, that with what we are doing with Project Kalo right now, it's not about a learning opportunity. It's not about taking our students to a training college. It's not about, but it is purely about the skills transfer. And let me give you an example, by the way, because we are dealing with a few of the things. One of it is simulation, that is moving with Project Kalo. Now, if you look at simulation, what is it that we want to do with simulation? We want our soldiers to be able to build simulators. Simulators which we can use as a defense force. Now, if we can be shown today that who is the person that is going to teach, is going to say to us, This is how you build this thing. And after building it, you can even develop some parts around it. Who is going to do that? And I am saying this with respect because such a skill has got to be sold and it will be very, very expensive. But let's take note of the fact that these are some of the things that we are looking at. And in the next one, we are looking at components of the various vehicles. So we are going much deeper into this. And that is the way, that is the route that we want to take for now. I need to say, Honorable Hatching, that the issue around preservation and that where are the vehicles and all of these things, I have answered that question by saying, if we were not where we are now, we would not be able to respond to anything. Right now, we are able to at least deploy, we are able to move our soldiers. There is one area, though, which the committee is well aware of it, and that area is an area of funding for us to be able to buy spares. In the case of our landward capabilities, there is no problem in making sure that we can repair these things because we have already produced these things and the soldiers are ready to do the repairs in terms of that. In the area of preservation, I have asked my colleagues that they just need to just give you a highlight to say, where have these equipments been preserved as we speak right now? And preservation by itself, in the way that it was being done previously, I want to say it's one of the areas where there's an improved way of doing preservation without me going into the detail. And having said that, Chairperson, if you would allow me, I want to believe that I covered in the main the majority of the things. I did address the issue of Dinel laying off people, and I did indicate where is that area of concern within Dinel, and that is what I can say about that one. Whilst we ourselves have lost skills, while Dinel was losing skills, because it happened all at the same time. We were losing skill and they were losing skills. So it's one of those things. Chair, I would want to give over to the Admiral, and hopefully I have addressed the critical issues. If I have not, I'll be checking through my notes while he's addressing. Admiral Mkonto.
Thank you, Chief of Staff, and thank you, Chairperson, through you, sir. The Chief of Staff has addressed most of what has been asked, but I would just like to re-emphasize here. The question is, have we managed to create internal capacity the last 10 years? The answer is yes. Not fully, but sustainably, as the Chief of Staff has mentioned. And now we're starting now to recapacitate now, as 42 engineers have been seconded. Probably before the end of the year, we might actually have more. And there is a plan for the next 5 years that we're going to actually further add more engineers to DINA. These are uniform members, not civilians. So there's a guarantee that we might be able to sustain them for the next 5 years or so. Now, in terms of the accreditation, is where the problem is now, where it sounded as if now whoever has been trained in Cuba comes back here and is not accredited. Now, I'd just like to mention to members here that even our own local students here are subjected to the same conditions. You don't come up from the university and automatically you are accredited. You have to go as an engineer, you have to go through the Engineering Council of South Africa. And it's a long process. After 4 years of studying university, you come and register. It will take you about 2 years to be accredited and to be a professional engineer. Myself, I've not actually managed to get that accreditation. It took me 2 years and I failed. So I'm trying to say, those students coming from Cuba, they're going to be subjected to the same conditions that the local ones are actually being subjected to. So it means that They will come and spend about 2 years, the engineers, before they are registered, similarly to the local ones as well. So to argue that those ones coming from Cuba are less capacitated, no, that is not true. Currently, we are busy aligning the curriculum for those that are in Cuba with these ones that are here in South Africa. And the bigger portion of our apprentices, currently they are undergoing trade tests across the country. So all of them will have a red seal. That might take them a little bit longer. After 3 years of study, to take them about maybe a year or 18 months or so to be trade tested. The trade test as well is similar. Even if in local, you can go to a TVET college. Still to prepare for a trade test, it will take you a little bit more. It will take about 18 months. I've been through that process, I know it. So we must start now lining up properly. The curriculums will be realigned. We are working on that to make sure that our members are accredited. With AGSA, that is easy. They open up their arms to say that we must engage them. And then those ones that are in Cuba currently will be subjected to the new curriculum that we're going to actually approve from this side. The Cubans are prepared to realign the training so that with the members coming back, they don't have to be seen as if they were trained less than these ones that are here in South Africa. I think for now I can pause and allow members to add value. Maybe the general can add on something on that.
Thank you very much, Silok. Chairperson, just one area which I think is also important to talk to, and that's the area of what if Project Kalo fails? What are we then going to do? Honorable members, I think this is a loaded question. One is not looking forward for this project to fail. But who knows, it's life, things can happen. And I just need to say why I'm saying we do not expect the project to fail. It's because of the relationship between South Africa and Cuba. There should be a major disaster for the project to fail. But assuming the project indeed failed, there are, what we are doing right now, it's something that we are not putting aside. It's our movement towards the TVET colleges. And I thought that the TVET colleges will also be a backup. And in moving towards the TVET colleges is to move towards the TVET colleges so that the current skilled, those who have been given the skills from the Cuban contract, can also take these other ones through coming from the TVET college so that we can then try and see how then do we move forward in terms of the building of skills. But as I said, that the new Kalo has got its own objectives that I've indicated as I was discussing in terms of this project. I think, Chairperson, through you once again, I want to check if General Mtsweni has got something to add.
No, I think Chief of Staff have already covered most of the point. But maybe to emphasize, the vision of Project Kalo is actually to capacitate ourselves primarily, but then we actually also look at what is the need of our country as a whole. And then that is why the Chief of Staff has emphasized in terms of the collaboration between ourselves and the TVET colleges and the universities of our country. We are actually looking at the collaboration in that level for our students to be able to collaborate with those members who are actually coming from the TVET schools, and then linking them up with the CSIR and also the DNEL in terms of to ensure that they reskill them and sharpen their skill so that they can be able to help DNEL and also CSIR in terms of innovative projects that they're going to come up with. Because this is actually what we actually want us to be able to do in order for us to be able to be self-sustainable, not only as a DOD, but also as a country as a whole. I thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Oh, you can come in, Sandra.
Okay, thank you, Chair. There was a question about how we are going to ensure that
I would like you to summarize because I still have the AG, I still have minutes. We still have to go for the budget. Okay, thank you.
Right. No, I was just saying we are going to make sure that the irregular expenditure does not happen. The amounts that have been quoted, we'll try to use the PFMA to make sure that we don't go over the budget that would be ring-fenced for this project. And we have also advised, I have advised the SANDF that we start a relationship with the professional bodies. That question was answered, so that our curriculum is aligned, because the problem is when your curriculum is not aligned with what the professional bodies require, then they will reject the students. So we'll make sure that that happens, but it's a long-term project, Chair, but we'll start with the conversations. I know that the SG has already started speaking to the Health Council on those matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the answers. We'll now give to the AGSA to make salient points on this presentation. Over to you. All right.
Thank you so much, Chair. We listened through to the presentation from the department. Maybe to just start off to say that embedded in our audit process is various communications that do take place. Some happen during a steering committee meetings and some happen written. And part of these findings that we've raised over the years have been part of the management report, where management were provided an opportunity to provide information that we require. It is unfortunate that this was not necessarily demonstrated as indicated. We did not receive that needs analysis or the cost benefit analysis. Therefore, that is why we've recommended it for Project Kalo. For the Project Kalo, we will then also request the same. We will request this needs analysis because it is important that this is done before the contract is finalized. It is important that the department understands what is it about skills transfer that we require, what is specific that we require. Because as you know, before you make a payment, you need to measure the milestones. Therefore, it would be important that even the qualitative factors that are embedded in the contract are measurable, and we can have a discussion with the department in terms of how they see it, so that we are on the same page. But it is important that those qualitative considerations are measurable and we are able to see that, and to also look at the impact that it has in the department, or if it's got an impact in Denel, to see that how does that have an impact, so that we do measure those qualitative considerations. I don't necessarily think you can make a payment without being able to measure the receivable of what was required to have received in terms of the scope. So for Project Kalo, we will then continue with the analysis. We will request the information from the department. I'm of the view from our recommendations that they do know what we do require. However, we will continue the engagements as we have been over the years. If we need to strengthen them, we will continue strengthening the engagements in order for us to make sure that we do achieve what Project Kalo entails to achieve. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, AGSA. I think just in concluding, before we go for our other business in terms of minutes, I think we have to, from the site, the department, acting SANDF and all the generals,
Once AG talks about needs analysis, they mean your skills development plan related to Project Kalo. You need to identify your mandate. You need to identify your core functions as the National Defence Force, the skills required in the next 3 or 5 years, and place them as a business plan in project, so that we don't just wake up and say 10 people to Cuba, 50 people to Cuba. There must be a plan related to the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and everybody. So these are our projections in terms of the journey to greatness, in terms of defense review 2025 to 2055. This is how we're going to deal with this. So that will help you to digest your needs analysis. In this regard, I think AGSA, yourselves and together with National Treasury, you will have in your sessions of steering committees, have to find a time where you train most of our senior management team in the National Defence Force in terms of TFNA, in terms of your audit regulations, so that they also understand, because we can't have so many queries and management letters were issued and there was no response from the department. So it means there's somehow a breakdown which we need to repair. So that's what I'm going to request. But the reparation of that breakdown can also be done by raising the level of awareness within our senior management team, because some of these things, if they are not done, may lead to possible prosecution and arrest, which could have been avoided if somebody was told that you're supposed to be on this lane, keep left, pass right, so that we understand each other. The other point that we need to work on is what the consequence management. Our cases are taking too long. We can't be a defense force where a case takes 5 years, 3 years, 2 years. Then our capacity goes on the challenge, including our intelligence capabilities. If we take forever as a national defense force, because we're the last line of defense. So our consequence management must be quicker and faster, because we have internal intelligence capacity to deal with other things. The other point which we have to conclude on is the collaboration. We've agreed on the institutions of artisans, TV colleges, including sectoral education and training, and the Department of Labor Skills. We are not using them effectively as a national. And there is money. There's National Skills Fund in the Department of Labor. There's about 80 billion, where we don't even have to use our funds. We can make a collaborative MOU with the Department of Labor and with friends, even let's say 200 opportunities to train members of the National Defence Force in cybersecurity. That we can do with Information Technology Center and funded by the Department of Labor or the Skill Fund. So those collaborations and MOU are going to be necessary, so that we don't cry about the budget, but we find creative ways to fund other programs within the department using other departments' money than our own. So I think that collaboration will have to be there, including trade centers for artisanal training and artisanal things. So I think the issue related to relationship with the professional bodies is very key. I agree that other skills may not need accreditation, but we need accreditation in South Africa for purposes of exit of some of our personnel. Because once they are fully accredited, either as an electrician, plumber, panel beater, they can go out and use that skill. for their own personal growth or personal wealth creation beyond their retirement or beyond their exit. So we need accreditation for purpose of that exercise. Even think that people will have to be in the defense force until they reach 60 or 65, when they can become entrepreneurs and tradesmen, it will be wrong for us to do that. So we must train them so that when they want to exit, they can do that with full confidence. Let me take this opportunity to thank the department for the reply and to thank the Office of the Auditor General for their presence. So we hope the steering committee meeting between the AG and the Department of Defense will be more effective, because I realized that there was a breakdown in terms of the AG and the Department of Defense relations. And you can see that from past 10-year audit outcomes and findings, that even respect for management letters or respect for AG's findings was somehow not fully complied with them. And it creates a serious breakdown in terms of the purpose of accounting and the purpose of using resources for the benefit of the nation. But nevertheless, we'll treat this as work in progress as the portfolio committee, and wish to thank you. Members of the portfolio committee will remain for us to process the minutes and other business of the portfolio committee. Thank you very much. You are released, both AG and the officials from the Department of Defense, led by the acting SANDF and Deputy Ministers, Honorable Bodamesa and Honorable. Thank you. The Secretariat. Secretariat.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, there are minutes for the 19th of February.
Yes, I
and
will
the
flag
26th
them
of
now
February.
too.
Okay, yes.
Finish.
All right. You can take us through.
Good afternoon, members again. These are minutes of the 19th of February. Are there any corrections on the attendance register?
Honorable members.
Any corrections on page 2? Any corrections on page 3? Page 4? Page 5? And the last page, page 6. Thank you, Chair. Hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Can we get a move and seconder?
Chair, I move.
Honorable Niels moves. Can we get a seconder?
Second, sir.
Who? Hello?
Yes, I said to the cool second, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Your Royal Highness. Dan Ngosi. Can we move to the next set of minutes?
Chair, just before you move on,
Okay.
may I ask whether the questions that were not responded to and should have been responded to within 7 days, were that in fact did we receive those responses?
Okay.
No, I haven't received anything, Mr. Hatting.
We did write to them.
If I recall correctly, if you can read under resolution the first bullet, it was gonna be after the strategic session that they would have. I'm not sure if they have held that strategic session yet.
Yes, I remember Honorable Onomisa said that there will be a strategic session between the ministry and all the generals, what is it, military command council, and they will come back to us. I think we just have to follow up in terms of that. You're correct, and Honorable Hatting is correct to request that the 7 days had passed. So I think let's this work in progress. Honorable Hatting will follow up from our side with the secretary.
Chair, if we can move on, the minutes, the other set of minutes, we will only adopt it when we sit physically, because the minutes of the closed meeting we had.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
No problem.
And then the second issue.
Yes.
The second issue is that with regards to the legal opinion regarding Mr. Niehaus and Ms. Khwekana's, remember that issue with the acting DG of the DMV. The legal services responded and they said that there's really no need, there's no legal opinion needed there. It all depends on the committee if it wants to entertain that or not. That's the response I received from legal services.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I think we'll have to bring it back to the committee so that we finalize on the way forward. No, thank you. Naldipa. There is no other business for today. This was the last item. So we can release all the members to attend the budget meeting. I'm sure a number of political parties will have debriefing session before 2 o'clock. So we'll release all the members to go and listen to their chief groups. In terms of the way forward, we don't know whether the presentation is there or what, but we still have to hear from our principals. Thank you very much, honorable members. The meeting is then adjourned. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.